Laura had never thought much about massages. Her husband, Daniel, was the one who always talked about how stress built up in the body, how relaxation was a form of healing. But lately, Daniel had seemed different, calmer, lighter, even happier. And Laura, who had spent the last few years feeling like their marriage was slowly fading into routine, noticed it right away. They had been married for 15 years, living in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. Their days looked the same. Daniel working long hours as a financial consultant, Laura managing the house and part-time design work from home. Their conversations had become short and practical about bills, groceries, and family updates, but not about them. One evening, Daniel came home smiling, a rare sight these days. "You look relaxed," Laura said, half joking. "I am," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Finally found something that actually helps. A massage therapist, Emily. She's amazing. I can't remember the last time my shoulders felt this good." Laura raised an eyebrow. "You, a massage?" He laughed. "Yeah, I know. But trust me, this woman knows what she's doing. You should try her out." She smiled politely. "Maybe I will," was a simple exchange. But that night, Laura lay awake thinking about it. It wasn't jealousy that stirred in her. It was curiosity, or maybe something deeper. Daniel hadn't looked this peaceful in months. And it stung a little that someone else had helped him get there. A few days later, Laura decided to go. She didn't tell Daniel, she just wanted to see for herself. The wellness studio was small but elegant, with soft lighting and a scent of lavender in the air. A calm voice greeted her at the front desk. "Hi, you must be Laura. Daniel mentioned you might stop by." Laura looked up. The woman was in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a professional warmth that filled the room. "I'm Emily," she said, extending her hand. "So nice to meet you." Laura smiled. "My husband said you were the best." Emily laughed softly. "That's sweet of him. Let's see what we can do for you today." Inside the massage room, everything was tranquil, soft piano music, dim lights, a faint scent of jasmine. Emily worked with quiet precision, her movements calm and practiced. Laura felt her tension melt away, and for the first time in months, she felt at peace. "You hold a lot of stress here," Emily said gently, pressing on Laura's shoulders. "Yeah," Laura murmured. "Life, I guess." Emily smiled. "We all need to learn to let go sometimes." When the session ended, Laura sat up, feeling strangely emotional. She looked at the framed quote on the wall. "Healing begins when you allow yourself to feel." Those words lingered in her mind long after she left. That night, Daniel noticed the change immediately. "You look different," he said. "Guess your masseuse works miracles." Laura replied with a faint smile. He grinned. "Told you, she was great." They both laughed. But something about the conversation felt oddly fragile, like glass that could shatter with the wrong word. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept going back to Emily. He said it helped with his back pain. But Laura noticed subtle things. How his mood changed after his appointments. How he smiled when her name came up. There was nothing wrong in what he said, nothing inappropriate. Yet something didn't feel right. One evening, while they were watching TV, Laura asked casually, "You've been seeing Emily a lot lately, huh?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, twice a week, sometimes 3. She's that good. 3 times." Laura repeated softly, pretending not to sound surprised. "Why? You jealous?" He teased lightly. She smiled faintly. "No, just curious." He laughed and turned his attention back to the screen. But Laura's mind stayed elsewhere. She told herself not to overthink it. Daniel wasn't the type to cheat. He was loyal, responsible. The kind of man who forgot their anniversary but never forgot to pay the mortgage. Still, a quiet unease began to settle in her chest. One Friday, Laura decided to stop by Daniel's office with lunch, something she hadn't done in a long time. But when she arrived, his assistant looked puzzled. "Oh, Daniel left early," she said. "Said he had a personal appointment." Laura froze for a second, masking her surprise with a polite smile. "Oh, right. Of course. Thanks." She didn't need to ask where he went. Her instincts told her everything. That evening, when Daniel came home, she noticed the faint scent of citrus oil on him, the same kind Emily used in her studio. "How was your day?" she asked quietly. "Busy," he replied, loosening his tie. "You?" "Same," she said softly, but her heart was pounding. Later, when he fell asleep, Laura sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. She didn't want to be suspicious. She wanted to trust him. But trust was something fragile, easy to give. It's hard to rebuild once it cracked. A week later, Laura returned to Emily's studio. She told herself it was just for another massage, but deep down, she wanted to understand what made this woman so different. Emily greeted her with that same warm smile. "Back again. That's great. How have you been feeling?" "Better," Laura said, forcing a smile. "Daniel says you've been helping him a lot too." Emily nodded. "He's been making great progress. It's nice to see him taking care of himself." There was nothing suspicious in her tone, just professional warmth. Still, Laura's heart twisted. When the session began, Laura tried to relax, but her thoughts wouldn't stop. She thought about the years she'd spent building this marriage. The way Daniel used to look at her, the laughter that used to fill their home. Somewhere along the way, that closeness had been replaced by silence, and now, perhaps, by someone else's voice at the end of the session. Emily said gently, "You seem tense today." Laura smiled sadly. "Maybe I just think too much." Emily gave her a kind look. "Sometimes we all do." That night, Laura decided to talk to Daniel. Not accuse, not confront, just talk. "I've been thinking." She began carefully as they sat in bed. "We haven't really spent much time together lately. Maybe we should take a weekend trip, just us." Daniel looked surprised. "A trip?" "Yeah," she said softly, "like we used to. Remember when we went to Lake Michigan that summer? It was nice." He hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know, Laura. Things are hectic at work right now." "You could make time if you wanted to," she said gently, looking at him. He met her eyes, then smiled faintly. "You're right. I'll think about it." But something in his tone felt distant, rehearsed later that night when he fell asleep. Laura opened her old journal, a habit she had stopped years ago. She began to write, her hand trembling slightly. "I miss him," she wrote. "I miss who we used to be." Maybe love doesn't end suddenly. Maybe it just fades quietly until one day you wake up beside someone you don't fully know anymore. Tears blurred her vision. She wiped them quickly, closing the book. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel flashed across the screen, "Working late again tomorrow. Don't wait up." She stared at the text for a long time, her heart heavy. She wanted to believe it. She truly did, but deep down she knew something was changing. Something she couldn't control, and for the first time, Laura wasn't sure if what hurt more was the fear of losing Daniel or the feeling that she already had. The next few weeks passed in uneasy quiet. Daniel was often late coming home, and when he did, he seemed distracted. Polite, kind even, but distant. Laura tried to convince herself that work was to blame. That was the easy answer. But deep down she sensed something had shifted between them. Something small but sharp enough to leave a mark. She started noticing little things. His phone, which once lay openly on the counter, was now always face down. His scent was different too, not his usual cologne, but something light, herbal, familiar. The same smell she'd noticed at Emily's studio. One night as she was clearing the dinner table, his phone buzzed. He was in the shower, so instinctively she looked at it. A message flashed across the screen. "Same time tomorrow." No name, just a number. Her heart skipped. It could have been work. Daniel had plenty of clients. Still, something in her gut whispered otherwise. She didn't touch the phone. She couldn't. Instead, she sat on the couch, waiting for him to return, her mind racing. When he walked in, towel draped around his shoulders, she smiled faintly, pretending nothing was wrong. "How was your day?" she asked. He shrugged. "Busy, as always." "You?" "Same," she said softly, but she knew something wasn't the same at all. Over the next few days, Laura began paying closer attention. Not spying, not searching for proof, just observing. She noticed how Daniel seemed more careful, how he'd linger on his phone and then quickly put it away, how he'd talk about Emily's studio casually, like it was no big deal, but with a tone that felt almost careful. One Friday evening, she decided to test the waters. "I was thinking of booking another massage," she said casually as they had dinner. He looked up quickly, then forced a calm smile. "That's a great idea. Emily will be happy to see you again." There was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease. Laura caught it immediately. The next morning, Laura made an appointment. She didn't tell Daniel. She needed clarity, not from him, but from her own heart. When she arrived, Emily greeted her warmly, as always. "Laura, it's so nice to see you again." Laura smiled. "I've been meaning to come back. Things have been stressful lately." Emily nodded kindly. "Let's help with that." As the session began, Laura tried to relax. The room was calm, the scent soothing, but her mind was restless. She watched Emily move around the room with grace, her voice gentle, her hands steady. It was impossible not to see why Daniel had felt comfortable here. Halfway through the session, Emily spoke quietly. "You and Daniel seem really close. He talks about you a lot." Laura's breath caught slightly. "He does." "Oh yes," Emily said with a soft smile. "He said you've been married a long time, that you're his calm place." Ah. For a moment, Laura felt relief. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe this was all just her imagination. "But then," Emily added softly, "he worries about you. He said he wishes you'd take more time for yourself." That line, so caring, yet so personal, made Laura's heart tighten again. She nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, her thoughts spiraled. When she left the studio, it was raining. The sky was gray and the city streets shimmered with reflections of passing cars. Laura walked slowly, letting the rain cool her face. She didn't know if she was angry, sad, or just tired. She loved Daniel deeply. That hadn't changed. But love wasn't always enough. Trust was the glue that kept love whole, and hers was starting to crack. That night, Daniel came home late again. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't want to hear a half-truth. Instead, she simply said, "I went to see Emily today." He paused in the doorway, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Oh, how was it?" "It was good," she said quietly. "She mentioned you talk about me." Smiled awkwardly. "Of course I do. You're my wife." She nodded slowly, studying his face. "And do you talk about her?" That caught him off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," she said quickly, turning away. "Forget I asked," sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Laura, please don't start imagining things. She's just my therapist. That's all." "I know," she whispered. "I just miss us." He didn't respond. He stood there for a moment, then quietly walked away. Days turned into weeks. They talked less. The silence between them grew louder. Laura felt like she was living in the same house with a stranger who used to be her closest friend. One evening, she went through an old photo album, their wedding day, their first apartment, the vacations they used to take. They looked so young, so sure, so happy. She could almost hear the laughter through the pictures. When Daniel came home that night, she showed him the album. "Do you remember this trip?" she asked, pointing at a picture of them laughing near Lake Michigan. He smiled faintly. "Of course I do. You were holding me like you'd never let go," she said softly. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "We were different then, were we?" she whispered. He didn't answer. The next day, Laura called her sister, Megan, who lived in New York. They hadn't spoken in months. But Laura needed someone to talk to. "Laura?" "You sound tired," Megan said gently. "I am," she admitted. "Daniel's been distant. I don't know if I'm imagining things, but something feels wrong." "Have you asked him directly?" "I tried. He gets defensive or changes the subject. I don't want to accuse him of something without proof." Megan sighed. "You don't need proof to feel neglected. Sometimes it's not about cheating, it's about disconnecting." Laura nodded slowly. "I just wish I knew what happened to us." "They'd find out," Megan said softly. Don't wait for him to explain. You deserve honesty. That night, Laura made a decision. She wasn't going to play detective, but she needed truth one way or another. When Daniel got home, she waited until he'd settled in. "Can we talk?" She asked. "Of course," he said, sounding cautious. She looked him in the eye. "I need to know what's going on. You've changed, Daniel. You're somewhere else lately, even when you're here." He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Laura, it's not what you think. I've just been stressed." "Then talk to me," she said gently. "Not Emily, me." Her words hung heavy in the air. He hesitated, then looked away. "She just listens," he said quietly. "She doesn't judge. I guess I needed that for a while." The words hurt more than she expected. "So you can talk to her, but not your wife." He looked back at her, guilt flickering across his face. "It's not like that. Then what is it like?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He couldn't answer for a long moment. They sat in silence to people who once shared everything, now struggling to find even a single word. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, the city lights flickering outside, and thought about what Daniel had said. He hadn't admitted to betrayal, not in the way people imagine, but emotional distance could feel just as painful. Maybe it wasn't infidelity of the body, but of the heart. She opened her journal again and wrote, "Maybe love doesn't die suddenly. Maybe it fades when we start sharing pieces of ourselves with someone else." She closed the book. Wiping away tears the next morning. When Daniel left for work, Laura watched him go, wondering if he would stop by the studio again. Part of her wanted to follow, to see for herself. But another part, the stronger one, knew that some truths reveal themselves in time as the sun rose higher. She stood by the window, taking a deep breath. The ache in her chest was real, but so was her strength. She wasn't going to let silence destroy her. Laura didn't know what the next days would bring: confrontation, clarity, or heartbreak. But she knew one thing: she deserved honesty. And she was finally ready to face it. And deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "The truth always finds a way out." The morning after their talk, Laura felt a calm she hadn't known in weeks. Not peace exactly, more like quiet before a storm. She had asked for honesty, and even though Daniel hadn't given a direct answer, his silence said more than words ever could. Something between them had changed, and no amount of pretending could make it feel normal again. Days passed slowly. Daniel went about his routine as if nothing had happened. Work, gym, appointments. Laura watched him closely. Not with anger, but with a kind of sorrow that only comes from knowing the person you love is already half gone. She didn't confront him again. She wanted him to be the one to come forward, to say something, anything that proved there was still truth left between them. But he didn't. One evening, Laura decided to stop waiting. She needed closure, even if it hurt. She drove downtown after work straight to Emily's studio. Her hands trembled slightly as she parked. The sky was turning pink with sunset. And she sat for a long time before going inside. The receptionist recognized her and smiled warmly. "Laura, it's nice to see you again. Emily's with a client right now, but she'll be done soon." Laura's stomach turned. "That's fine," she said softly. "I'll wait." She sat in the quiet lobby, listening to the faint sound of instrumental music through the thin walls. After a few minutes, she heard laughter, Daniel's voice. She knew it instantly. The sound pierced through her chest like a whisper from another life. When the door opened, Daniel stepped out, surprised to see her. "Laura?" She stood slowly, forcing a calm tone. "I didn't realize you had an appointment today." He blinked, guilt flashing in his eyes. I thought I told you." "You didn't," she said quietly. Emily appeared behind him, polite and composed. "Laura." "Hi, is everything okay?" Laura nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I just came to talk." Daniel shifted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should go home and—" "No," Laura said firmly. "We'll talk here." Emily stepped back, giving them space. Laura looked at Daniel for a long moment before speaking. I need you to tell me the truth. No excuses, no pretending. What's going on between you and her?" He hesitated, glancing at Emily, who looked equally stunned. "Laura, please don't do this here." "I think this is exactly where it should happen," she said softly but firmly, "because this is where it started." Daniel rubbed his face, the weight of guilt heavy on his shoulders. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is," she pressed. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've built a secret world I don't belong in." He looked at her, tired, conflicted, and finally sighed. "I didn't cheat, Laura. Not physically. But I crossed a line. I started talking to her about things I should have talked to you about." Laura's heart ached. "So you gave her the part of you that used to be mine." He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was just lonely. We were distant, and Emily listened. That's all it was." Emily spoke gently. "Laura, I didn't mean to come between you two. I only ever wanted to help." Laura nodded slowly. "I believe you. But sometimes people get close without realizing how deep it's gone until it's too late." The room went quiet. Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. For a moment, Laura just stood there, holding back tears. She had imagined shouting, crying, demanding explanations. But instead, felt a strange calm, the kind that comes when you finally stop wondering. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "I wish you had said it sooner." Daniel stepped forward. "Laura, please. I made a mistake. I know that now. I don't want to lose you." She looked at him sadly. "You already lost parts of me, Daniel. The parts that trusted without question." He reached out as if to touch her hand, but she stepped back. "I need time," she said. "Not punishment, not anger, just time to find myself again." He nodded, his voice breaking. "I'll give you whatever you need." Laura turned to Emily. "You're good at what you do," she said quietly. "But maybe you should remember that people who come to you are vulnerable. You have more power than you realize." Emily lowered her eyes. "You're right." Without another word, Laura walked out. Outside, the evening air was cool. The city lights flickered on as she stood on the sidewalk, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, the ache in her chest didn't feel suffocating. It felt freeing. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just done living in confusion. When she got home, she sat on the couch and stared at the framed photo of her and Daniel from years ago, smiling, holding hands, filled with hope. That version of them was gone. But maybe, she thought, that didn't mean her story was over. Maybe it was just changing. The next morning, Daniel came home from work early. He found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee. "I took the day off," he said quietly. "Why?" she asked, not looking up. "Because I don't want to pretend anymore," he said. "You were right. I let something innocent turn into something that hurt us both. But I want to fix this if you'll let me." "What?" She looked at him, uncertain. "Fixing it means rebuilding trust." "That's not easy." "I know," he said. "But I'm willing to try no matter how long it takes." Laura studied his face. Tired, remorseful, honest. She had loved him for too long to hate him now. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," she said softly, "but I can try." A faint smile touched his lips. "Then that's enough for me." The following weeks were slow, fragile, but real. Daniel canceled his sessions with Emily and started therapy with Laura instead, a couples counselor they both agreed on. They learned to talk again, not just about problems, but about small, everyday things. Some nights they still sat in silence. But it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was the silence of two people learning to listen again. One evening, while walking near the lake, Daniel stopped and looked at her. "I don't deserve another chance," he said, "but I'm grateful you gave me one." She looked out at the water, the sunlight glinting off the surface. "I gave us one," she said simply. Months later, Laura opened her journal for the first time since that night. She read her old entries full of pain, doubt, and fear, and then wrote a new one. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting what broke you and learning how to move forward anyway. She closed the journal with a soft smile. Years passed and their marriage found new rhythm. Not perfect, not effortless, but honest. Sometimes Laura still thought about Emily, not with bitterness, but with understanding. People make mistakes, she had learned. What matters is what you do after. She didn't see herself as a victim anymore. She was a woman who had faced the storm and chosen to rebuild. And Daniel, humbled and changed, never forgot what nearly losing her had taught him. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Daniel said quietly, "You know, sometimes I think that whole mess was a wake-up call." Laura smiled faintly. It was, but it woke us both. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. For the first time in years. The silence between them felt peaceful, not empty.